Previously, I released a video to showcase Wazuh, an open source security platform, and it is extremely cool. But in this video, I want to chat a little bit more about detection engineering with Wazuh, so that you could build rules, detection rules, and generate alerts based off of malware or other malicious activity. So we'll walk through one example where we can put this together and track down some of the tradecraft for malware. First things first, let me show you the setup of our virtual environment. I have two different virtual machines running. First is our Windows client. Really, this is the endpoint where the Wazuh agent will be installed, and that will be the one that has malware infecting it. And alongside that, I have a second virtual machine set up that is our Wazuh server. Now this is running Ubuntu Linux. I do already have Wazuh all installed and set up here. If you're interested, hey, take a look at that other video where we can get Wazuh up in action. Now I am on the Wazuh management dashboard, but before we get started with some detection engineering, I do need to get an agent already set up and rolling on our Windows VM. We can cruise through this. Deploying an agent is not hard at all. I'll go ahead and click an MSI installer for Windows and add our server address. Checking this quickly in the terminal, I believe we are 192.168.111.198. We can copy and paste that. Default hostname is fine, and all we really need to do is go ahead and install it with this invoke web request to download it and set it all up. Back on Windows, let me open up an administrator PowerShell prompt. We can copy and paste. Let's net start Wazuh service, and then we're good to go. Now, if I even take a look at the dashboard from the agent, we can go to our HTTP 192.168.111.198. That'll bring us to our Wazuh dashboard, and we should see our agent already there and working for us. It is going to use a self-signed certificate, so we'll go ahead and accept the risk and continue. And there is my Windows 11 host. Now, by default, Wazuh gets a lot of logs from the Windows event viewer. That's not all it gets, but it'll pull and collect a whole lot of Windows events. Unfortunately, the Windows event log isn't extremely rich with everything that could be helpful for telemetry and visibility. It's not tracking a lot of the things that it could, even in the Microsoft Windows applications directory, so we'd like to amp up some of our log telemetry. One awesome way to do that is to use Sysmon. Now, if you haven't heard of it, Sysmon is part of the Sys internal suite, monitors and reports key system activity via the Windows event log. So it gives Wazuh a little bit more eyes and ears, and it's extremely easy to install and use, and genuinely, I really recommend this to gosh darn everyone. If you don't have any EDR or XDR solution, well, hey, you should try out Wazuh, but you absolutely want Sysmon. Installation is not hard at all. Let me download Sysmon. I'm going to open this in my downloads folder, but actually extract it to just somewhere on the root of the file system like Sysmon, so it's an easy place for me to be able to access it. And from there, we can get it up and running, but we do need to give Sysmon a configuration file. Sysmon configuration files are typically in XML, the extensible markup language, and that is a theme that we'll see all throughout this video, but there are a lot of ready-made Sysmon configs already available out about online. I believe there is one sweet one put together by Swift on Security, but Wazuh actually puts one out just as well that has a lot of the wires put together to be able to connect Wazuh and Sysmon for telemetry, logging, and visibility. I will include a link in the video description, but this should be pretty easy for us to download and use. So back in our administrative PowerShell terminal, I will hop over to that C:\/Sysmon directory here. Let me wget down that config file. I believe it will be able to write to the file system without any arguments, fingers crossed. Let me ls super quick. No, okay, so we do need to wget that link once again, but make sure we supply an out file of sysmonconfig.xml just to match the file name. Good enough. Now we have that present. And now we can install Sysmon with the sysmon64.exe executable for 64-bit. We'll use -accept EULA, so we won't need to click the button to accept the end user license agreement. We'll use -I to install, and we'll specify that sysmonconfig.xml file. As I hit enter here, it'll go ahead and get the driver all situated and set up, because Sysmon does end up using a kernel driver to get all that sweet visibility. But now all of that will be funneled to the Windows event log and things that Wazuh could be configured to get that data, and we could then build detection rules based off of it. I do want to be sure to at least slightly reference the sysmon documentation, or at the very least this Microsoft knowledge base article, to tell you all that it can do. There are a couple screenshots if you see it in action with the Windows event log, some usage on how to get it installed, everything set up, just that we've just done. But down below, you can actually see a couple of the different events and the event IDs that make sense for what you might be looking for, like process creation, things running or happening on your computer, process change given a file time, process change a file creation time, network connection, process terminated, driver loaded, image like a DLL loaded, create remote thread, all this cool stuff. Even registry, file access, and other pertinent information. Seriously, there's a ton of cool stuff here. I'll include a link to this in the video description just as well. Definitely recommend you take a look. Now, just as a quick example, we can open up any program to see that sort of process creation event ID 1 in our event logs and validate that sysmon is doing what it should. Let me open up the event viewer one more time. I'm actually going to close this out and just kind of start from a clean slate since we've got it up and running now. In the application and services log, as I drill down into that, take a look at Microsoft, drill down into Windows, and scrolling down, we should find a sysmon folder that is created. I see it here. Double click into this, we can see the operational log, and now we have all these events. And many with MITRE attack techniques kind of added on thanks to the sysmon config that we got from Wazuh. You can see all these, if we expand them out, you can see all the event IDs in the column there. And if we want to look for those event ID 1, sort of process creation, we can even filter for that if we'd like. We can filter current log for event IDs just being simply 1. Now I'll drag this up to the very top of the screen so we can kind of get a better idea as to what is running when. We can see mmc.exe being executed. That's just the simple viewer for our event viewer application. But there is Notepad being opened up, and we can see all the other pertinent information like the fields that sysmon would give us. Of course, image being the executable .exe itself. We can see the timestamp, we can see the process ID, even the exact command line as to how it was invoked. Now, with all that said, we are not yet done with the setup of sysmon for our Wazuh agent. We still have to actually configure it and tell it to send and forward these sysmon logs to the Wazuh SIEM and XDR solution. So this means that we actually have to change Wazuh's configuration. Let's go up to the File Explorer and actually go check out where is Wazuh installed. You can typically find the path in C:/ and then the program files x86, and OSSec is the OSSec agent that Wazuh will get a lot of its info from. One of the defining files here is ossec.conf, and we can open that up in a text editor of our choice to try and make some changes. So I like to use Sublime Text as my text editor, but I will note you'll need to open this file and make changes as an administrator, or have some higher privileges. So when I enter this in the Start menu, I'll hit Control-Shift-Enter on my keyboard to open this with a UAC prompt, user account control, to make sure it is opened with admin rights. In this configuration file, just as I alluded to earlier, we're going to see a lot of XML, or the extensible markup language, is written in XML. There are a whole lot of different settings here for you to be able to tweak and tune how your agent works, how often or how frequently it'll send information back, directories that it might be using for file monitoring, other things with like their active defense, and all the super cool stuff you can do with Wazuh. But for all what we need to do in this detection engineering example is simply add in, hey, some new capability to get logs from the sysmon event viewer log location. What this ultimately ends up being is making sure you are still inside of your OSSec config sort of logic branch here, inside of the tag and element for that. We'll create a new local file entry that we can close and build out. We need to specify the location, which should be just as we've kind of seen in the Windows event viewer, Microsoft Windows sysmon/operational. We'll close out that location tag. And then we specify the log format. That should simply be event channel, just as it's seen in other spots. With that all done, and you can add a comment here if you wanted to, sysmon added as log source. Once that file is saved, we can go ahead and restart the Wazuh service to make sure it'll properly send this to the server. That means back in our Windows terminal, let me restart service Wazuh SVC. Okay, should be done. Now if I jump back to the Wazuh management dashboard, we can get back to the start here and actually take a look at the whole section for threat hunting. From the homepage dashboard, there is a card here that will take you right there, or if you're navigating to the sort of hamburger menu, I believe you'll find it just in the expanded threat intelligence section. That will give you a nice little dashboard to kind of see, hey, here's a big broad strokes overview of your alerts and what it's seeing thus far, or you could actually zoom in. You could add any filter you might like. You could, of course, change the timestamp or sort of window of time and duration that you're looking at, search for anything that you might like. But if we want to just kind of get a flood of the events, you can hop on over to the Events tab. Now, we should be able to see a good amount of interesting stuff here. Let me add a note, though. These are just the stock sort of detections that come from the sysmon config that we got from Wazuh. That may or may not work for you in your environment. You can, of course, tweak and tune these as you would like. But if we were actually taking a closer look, hey, there's the agent service starting and stopping. And a lot of these that just came through, if we take a look at them, let me expand on this. We should be able to see this is actually coming from sysmon. Take a look. There's that data win system channel, and that source being Windows sysmon operational. And there are the process create events, just as we would have expected with that event ID 1. Now, of course, there are a whole lot of other event IDs that this will collect, but I'll admit I have not seen anything really show here in this events sort of display unless a rule fired, unless any alert we're actually tracking this, pulling it down. So we need to now build some rules. So finally, after all this talk and setup, we're at a place where we could really do the detection engineering that we kind of wanted to do for this video. But I think it is super duper important to try your darndest to at least have visibility and telemetry over a lot of the living off the land techniques. Especially in the Windows environment, hey, some native, natural, built-in, and installed by default binaries, programs, or applications that can be used and abused by hackers, threat actors, malware, what have you. What we could do really now is build out our own detectors and, hey, create that in Wazuh syntax and have it be alerted on in our own home lab environment, or again, an organization, production company, or business. Just for a bit more of a real world example, I think it'd be fun to try to put together at least a extremely primitive detector for not something strictly in LOLBAS or the living off the land binary scripts and libraries sort of reference and catalog here. But let me actually use as an example cipher.exe. Not sure if folks are familiar with this one, but cipher.exe is a native built-in Windows command line tool that can very well try to overwrite or clobber files on your file system. It's intentionally used for good reasons with the EFS capability that Windows offers, but it could very well be used by threat actors, ransomware actors, having kind of a native way to do ransomware, even if it's clobbering, wiping, or clearing stuff on your device. At the very least, cipher.exe probably shouldn't be ran naturally just by any regular old Windows user, so I'd like to at least get notified and have an alert fire when it is invoked. Some of the example usage is really using cipher.exe to overwrite any deallocated data, and cipher as the command with the /w::a location could end up being used, and it's oftentimes seen just to clobber an entire drive. But I'm gonna keep it simple, not gonna lie. I just want to fire on any natural invocation of Cypher, no matter what. Whether it includes arguments one way or another, it's probably still a little bit sus that it's in use. So there are a couple different ways we can put together a rule with Wazuh. One is kind of being on the server itself. Since we have control over this Ubuntu Linux machine, we can just open up our terminal, and really you will need to kind of manipulate things as root in this case. So I'll probably need to just get into a root shell. Let me sudo bash and then get into our root user. The location on the file system for a lot of this work is actually in var. Inside of that var directory, they do have an OSSec folder already set up as Wazuh has been staged and installed. And in that, they actually have an etc folder. Moving into that directory, we now have a folder called rules. And this is where we could add in and put our own rules. They have a local rules.xml file, and we'll create our own. And of course, there are other rules that are kind of scattered throughout that file system tree there. In fact, let me show it to you back over on the management dashboard side, knowing that, okay, we can see and get into the real raw files over on the server side. This is an example here, and of course we could make or manipulate our own. But if I bring us back to the dashboard, you might already be well familiar with the fact that you can of course tweak and tune any of these rules from just a dashboard on their own. The server management section from that left-hand hamburger menu navigation will let us explore all the different rules across all the original groups that would have came with Wazuh and plenty more. Especially now that we've added sysmon, we could simply search for that and see all the ones pertinent to our sysmon group. Nothing stopping you though with any of the buttons at the toolbar here. You can manage these rules to see the files and their location, or we could simply add a new rules file and enter this as needed. If you want to ever import things, export them, you certainly can. Let me go track down that local rules.xml file that we saw. You can see the path given there. And of course, if I were to edit this, it's the exact same thing you saw in Sublime Text over on the server side. Anyway, let's build our own new rule. Let me go ahead and add a new rules file. And with this all being put together in XML as the syntax, it can get a little bit verbose. But if you bear with me, ultimately everything needs to be in a group, and it can be in any number of groups. You can add more than you would like. We can create a sysmon one, and we can just call it for cipher, just so I can easily track that. And as we build out that group, we'll start to add the conditions for matching this rule. So we'll need to build out a rule and give an ID number. I'll admit I'm not positive where, when, how the ruling ID number starts and ends. 99890. Hey, super quick editing note and correction. When making custom rules, the ID value that you choose should actually be in the range of 100,000 to 120,000. Wazuh has some other sweet documentation on this, and I'll be sure to link that in the video description. So my mistake there, but we can continue on. And then you'll specify the level. What is the severity? If we take a look back at the documentation for Wazuh, they have this all easily available online. You can see the rules syntax and all of the sort of options, things that are necessary. It tells you also the levels that should be set as the priority, really, or how far along is it in the queue? Is this a medium severity alert? Is it a high severity alert? Is it critical, etc.? Let me Control F for level, and you can see one of the conditions where the level is typically set from 1 to 16. If I actually keep looking for this, you can see a couple examples here where they have that set. Yep, allowed values 0 to 16, specifies the level of the rule, alerts and responses use that value. I believe anything with a level 12 and above is considered critical, so let's make that a lucky 13, I suppose, and close our rule. We can make it super critical, high severity, even just for our learning to kind of poke around and play. Now we'll build off of given field names that would have came from the log source and the sysmon records that we're seeing as the events get streamed to Wazuh. The field name should be what we're trying to match off of when we try to look for, hey, can we see cipher or cipher.exe or whatever we're looking for in any of those fields. So in this case, that field name, you might have been able to see it when we looked at that sort of table structure on the right side for the event, but we want win event data.image. Remember, even as we were looking in the event viewer, image was one of those fields. There was process ID, there was user, there was working directory, all this. And then we'll specify the type of what we're looking for. Now, boilerplate here, this is PCRE2. To refer to regular expressions. I'm not sure if it's Perl, compiled Perl, compliant Perl, something. Regular expressions. Regular expressions is really what's important there. So I know I'm making this as dumb and stupid and as simple as possible. I literally am just going to be looking for cipher.exe in the execution, the image, the executable that is fired and ran, but that's a fine proof of concept in our case. Then we simply add a description, like what we want to be displayed as the message when this is shown in our events listing. So we can see possible cipher.exe execution detected. There are other XML tags, of course, you could add here, just referencing the documentation we saw a moment ago. Maybe you want to add some of the MITRE techniques or anything else. We could explore that, and I think we will in just a little bit, but let's go ahead and save this. We can make this our cipher rule.xml. There we go. Let me save this. Changes will not take effect until a restart is performed. If you are on the server side, you could systemctl Wazuh restart. I think it's actually systemctl restart Wazuh-manager. But regardless, we can click the easy button and just press the restart. Okay, now our Wazuh manager has been restarted and we can go take a look at our threat hunting and see the events. I'll note though, we probably aren't going to see anything relating to our rule, well, because we haven't really fired Cypher.exe as a proof of concept yet. And I will add a note, I am intentionally driving us into a wall here, so take that for what you will. We'll see us stumble in just a moment, but let's try and run Cypher.exe and see if we can get an alert or a rule to fire. So on our Windows agent, right, could I just simply run Cypher.exe, which will get logged by sysmon, added to the event log, and then now sent to Wazuh, that should have a rule fire for it, correct? Let's hop back over to our dashboard and let me Control-Shift-R to see if we can get a hard refresh and hopefully, potentially, pull down that entry for our Cypher.exe. But not quite see anything just yet. And this might make us wonder, okay, can we filter? Can we search? Can we change the dates to maybe just a couple minutes ago? Maybe 1 hour ago is fine. But all we're still seeing are the Wazuh server being started on the Ubuntu agent, which is the server itself, right? Could I search for, maybe even add a filter for our rule.groups? Should be, if we set is to Cypher was one specific one that we added, but it doesn't know what it is. We could add it as a custom option, but there's still nothing firing yet. Why is that? We can keep refreshing over and over again. We could try to run Cypher.exe again. We could even check the event logs. Opening up Event Viewer, even again, application service logs, Microsoft, Windows, let's get to sysmon, let's see the operational log. If I were to try to Control F for Cypher.exe, it has a result, even does the file created when it's trying to build out the prefetch file. You can see the .pf there in C Windows prefetch. Event ID 10, process access, you can see again, PowerShell trying to create and spawn target image of Cypher.exe. And there's our event ID 1, process create for Cypher.exe. So why doesn't Wazuh see it quite yet? So I think this is a speed bump that I really want to make sure is clarified, because I know that I have tripped over this before, and I'm curious if anyone else has while they're trying to do some of that detection engineering with Wazuh. Let me search for Cypher, which is, we know, the rule that we put together, right? Possible Cypher.exe execution detected. If I were to try to view alerts, again, we'll see nothing. Can I edit this rule? We'll have to go to the Manage Rule Files section just up top, and then we can search for Cypher once again. That will allow us to edit with the pencil icon there. There is some special syntax that we'll need to sprinkle in for another XML tag called if_sid. And I'll close this out here. And the number in between here, the value set, is actually what you should be knowing and tracking for how Wazuh will sort of map and interpret what would be sysmon events and records and things that will fire when sysmon fires. Does that kind of make sense? I'd love to even, hey, if you would like to help me out a little bit, check my understanding in the comments below, please do say the word. But everything that I've seen putting this together references an if_sid entry. And when we look back at the Wazuh documentation, looking for that if_sid, it is a list of rule IDs separated by commas or spaces that is similar to parent decoder. It matches when a rule ID on the list has previously matched. Which means this is a little bit important because we'll use it to narrow down and filter for a regular event ID 1 process create event via sysmon. Now, I'll admit, I got this breadcrumb and nugget from the Wazuh blog, like information that they've shared on how to detect different malware families. Here's one example just recently they put out in December, chatting about Deer Stealer, another info stealer that includes a couple of the hash samples or the sample hashes for that malware and different variations that have been analyzed. I think this was kind of a cool joint work with AnyRun. But look, they walk through similar stuff that we did, hey, getting sysmon up and running. And then as you get further and take a look as they're building these rules pertinent to the Wazuh server, as I showed you in that directory path, var, osec, etc. rules, they put this all together where they always reference an if_sid and an ifsid and another ifsid where these numbers didn't make a ton of sense to me. I know the rule ID was somewhat sort of your own choosing and an arbitrary decision, but ifsid seemed to really matter apparently. So here's the thing. If we go back to our Wazuh dashboard, looking back at our rules, you might have even seen this as we were checking it out just a moment ago. If I search for sysmon, you can see all the other rules that are pertinent to it kind of by default with the sysmon config we all set up. But take a look. A couple of these numbers in the rule ID sort of left-hand column here match what we saw just in that blog post. Like process creation, event ID 1 matches that 61603. Another for 61604, event 2, etc., etc., etc. We could expand this for more rows per page if you're interested. But this is how we can map what would be a sysmon event ID to the way that Wazuh will interpret it by its decoder, and then we could build our rules with our local rules.xml file and others. All that is to say, our magic number for what we should include for our ifsid tag should match the one for our process create sysmon event ID 1. That is 61603. So let me modify this, 61603, and now I'm hoping, we're crossing our fingers again, can we actually see this rule fire, even just a small primitive proof of concept? Let's go ahead and restart the manager. So taking this cradle to the grave, let's go back to our terminal, try to run cipher.exe once again, and you could, I don't know, be running with any of the command line arguments, flags or switches or whatever, but we're only looking based off of the binary image, the exe file that's ran. So when I enter this, it is logged, it is added, sent to Wazuh. Can we get our alert and our rule to fire now? Let's look back at things, fingers crossed. Back over in our threat hunting page, looks like we have a couple more level 6 or above alerts. Can I take a look at the events here? Ooh, there it is. Possible cipher.exe, execution detected. Rule level 13 with the rule ID that we set, that all works. That matches everything that we thought. So, extremely simple, small proof of concept, seeing cipher.exe being executed with the rule that we got to completely define, customize, tweak, tune, do whatever we want with. Now I know that was a teeny weeny example, but we've also now gotten a little bit smarter as to how these detection rules can come together with Wazuh, even just referencing their blogs and some past examples. Like Deer Stealer as an example, we might be able to, I think it would be good for some fireworks for the end here. We've got sysmon configured, we've got some of the forwarding done. We could just try to use these rules that they've created, get a better idea for their syntax. Like, look at how they're doing their detection. All this is regular expressions, right? So there are a lot of backslashes to denote what would be a new file path. I think those have to be escaped to begin with. And it's whether it's in Windows or users, any files that could be used with the pipe to specify an or, one or the other. And these other rules that might trigger could be for specific, registry modifications, like persistence being added as an auto run or startup, the file creation, another event ID that would tie to a different SID, the process creation, as we saw, 61603, that maps well, or even the network connectivity and all the MITRE tags that could be added just as well. So what's to stop us from trying to use all of this and making our own Deer Stealer detection set as an example? And let's run Deer Stealer, get the actual malware, and invoke the info stealer in our virtual environment to see all these rules trigger. So we know this process now, right? We can head over to our rules, simply add this in when we add a new rules file. Let's put this all there and make our Deer Stealer rules. .xml, we can go ahead and save that. We'll go ahead and restart the manager as usual. And let me go see, do they actually link the either analysis or the sample in the blog? They do. Okay, by any run. Perfect. Looks like it is an info stealer malware discovered in 2024. They have a couple samples. Let's get an old one so there isn't hopefully infrastructure up. Bitcoin Core, that sounds perfect. Let's work with that one. One of the best things about any run is that it is extremely easy to get and download the sample. We can go ahead and slap that into our malware folder for us. Once that is staged in the virtual machine, I'm going to make sure to extract it here. The password should be infected, as is the norm. And this is a .bin extension at the end here, but we do want to make sure that's just a .exe. And there is our Bitcoin Core Deer Stealer malware. So now we get to do the fun, flashy fireworks, running malware. And with that, of course, we do absolutely want to be inside of our virtual environment. That's why you might want to put together this home lab, the sandbox environment, and have Wazuh, XDR, SIEM solution, anything to be able to do even some of this detection engineering in a safe, secure space way. Let me go ahead and double click on Bitcoin Core. Nothing particularly happens because, you know, it's just malware doing malware things that we don't get to see. But let's go take another look at Wazuh. Let me go back one by one so you can see this all for realsies. Getting over there, take a look at the events. Do we have anything with our Deer Stealer yet? Refresh the page, try to get the latest results. What do we have here? I see a couple interesting things. Oh, there's our alert. Possible Deer Stealer malware executed. We could drill down into this one if we wanted to, see a little bit more of the alert information. Looks like, okay, this is coming from PowerShell.exe as the image, but because it was what looks like a registry configuration being set, well, okay, now we've got that discovered, caught, identified, and we have the visibility with what could very well be malicious activity from malware, threat actors, hackers, anything. And it's really cool that we can customize this. We can make it our own. And that was all thanks to Wazuh, the open source security platform with XDR and SIEM solution efforts and really, really cool opportunity for detection engineering. I think there's a little bit to kind of get used to in the XML syntax. I know it can be a little bit verbose, but you've got fine-grained control with all of those regular expressions, and you can stockpile them as much as you would like. I, for one, think that is pretty cool, and if it's anything to get a little bit more love for that detection engineering, blue team work, threat hunting, incident response, malware analysis, just tracking threat actors and all the stuff in cybercrime, look, it's got to be done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got to learn a little bit of some of that work with Wazuh. Of course, big thanks to Wazuh for sponsoring this video, and thank you so much for checking out the video. Please do all those YouTube algorithm things, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.